The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house, a low, monotonous drone that vibrated through the floorboards. It was 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, an hour when the world felt suspended in amber, when even the ghosts were asleep. Then my phone, lying face down on the granite countertop, buzzed. Not a ring, just a single, insistent vibration, a text. The message wasn't just a notification, it was a detonation. It came from my wife, Isabella. She was supposed to be in Las Vegas, attending a 3-day marketing conference for the pharmaceutical company where she worked. A sea of beige conference rooms, stale coffee, and forced networking, or so I'd thought. The screen lit up with a photograph. It was her standing under the lurid pink and blue neon of a Vegas wedding chapel. Her smile was wide, almost feral, a triumphant baring of teeth I hadn't seen in years. Beside her, his arms slung possessively around her waist, was Charles. Charles, her blandly handsome coworker, the one she'd always dismissed as a work husband, a harmless office fixture. They were grinning like lottery winners, holding up freshly minted marriage certificates to the camera as if they were trophies. Beneath the photo, the text message was a masterpiece of casual cruelty. Just got hitched to Charles. Been sneaking around with him for 8 months. Smoothest operation ever. Honestly, dealing with you is like taking candy from a baby. Thanks for being such a joke. Have a blast in your sad little world. XOXO. I stared at the screen. The initial shock was a physical thing. A punch to the diaphragm that knocked the air from my lungs. It wasn't the hot, blinding rage you see in movies. It was a cold, creeping paralysis. My world, the carefully constructed edifice of my life, hadn't just cracked. It had been leveled. I could feel the blood draining from my face, a tingling numbness spreading down my arms. The refrigerator hummed on, oblivious. Sad little world. The words echoed in the cavernous silence of my kitchen. 30 seconds passed. Maybe a minute. I reread the message, then the message before that, a text from her that afternoon. Ugh. Keynote speaker is so boring. Wish I was home with you. Miss you. The sheer breathtaking audacity of the lie was almost admirable. It was a con artist's flourish. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What does a man type in response to such a message? A torrent of rage? A string of questions? A plea for an explanation? No. All of that would be a performance for her. A validation of her power. It would give her the drama she clearly craved. I felt a switch flip inside me. The shock receded, replaced by an Arctic calm. A clarity so sharp, it felt like a weapon. She wanted a reaction. She would not get the one she expected. I typed one word. Okay, and I sent it. No punctuation, just the flat, dismissive finality of it. Then, before she could process the anticlimax, I began to move. Speed was essential. She thought this was a game she had already won. She had miscalculated. Isabella, for all her cunning in orchestrating an affair, was a novice in the brutal mechanics of life. She lived in a world of emotions and grand gestures. I lived in a world of contracts, passwords, and consequences. Everything was in my name. The house, purchased with my inheritance 2 years before we even met. The joint bank accounts, which were, in reality, my primary accounts to which I'd granted her access. The credit cards in her wallet, gleaming plastic bearing her name but tethered as an authorized user directly to my credit, my financial standing. A rookie mistake, Isabella, a fatal one. It was 2:05 a.m. I was at my desk, the glow of my monitor painting my face in stark blue light. First, the credit cards. I logged into the bank portal. American Express Platinum, Isabella Moretti. Authorized user. Action, remove user. A click, a confirmation box. Are you sure you want to remove this user and cancel their card? Click. Done. Chase Sapphire Reserve, Isabella Moretti. Authorized user. Click, confirm, click, done. Bank of America. Cash rewards, click, click, done. In less than 90 seconds, her financial freedom, the ability to buy a coffee or book a new hotel room, had evaporated into the digital ether. Next, the bank accounts. I changed the passwords first, a complex new string of characters and symbols. Then, I initiated a transfer. The entire balance of our joint checking and savings, just over $74,000, I moved into a separate, individual account I'd maintained for my own investments. The transfer was instantaneous. The account she believed was her safety net now contained a balance of $0. The passwords came next. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, our shared email account, the cloud storage where our photos lived, the security system app, everything. Each one was changed, erased, and rebuilt with a new, impenetrable logic she could never guess. I moved with a detached, surgical precision. There was no emotion, only a checklist. Each completed task was a small, satisfying click, another brick laid in the wall that was now her prison. At 3:15 a.m., I made the last call. A 24-hour locksmith. "Emergency lockout service," I said, my voice steady. "My house. I need every exterior lock changed, immediately." "That'll be a premium, sir. $300 plus the cost of the hardware." "I don't care what it costs. Get here now." He arrived at 4:30 a.m., a tired-looking man with grease under his fingernails and a toolbox that rattled like a skeleton. He worked efficiently, drilling out the old locks on the front door, the back door, the side garage entrance. The sharp metallic screech of the drill was the only sound that broke the pre-dawn stillness. As he worked, I screenshot everything. The text message from Isabella, the photo, the timestamp. I forwarded it all to my personal email with the subject line: "Evidence, 10/17." By 5:30 a.m., it was done. New keys sat heavy in my palm. The garage door keypad had a new code. I paid the locksmith in cash, adding a $100 tip. He nodded, his eyes weary, asking no questions. He'd seen it all before. I walked back into the silent house. My house. I was exhausted, but it was a strange, wired exhaustion. The adrenaline of the past few hours had burned away the grief, leaving behind a hollow, resonant core of something else: control. I had survived the initial blast. Now I was managing the fallout. I crawled back into bed, but not to sleep. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the silence, a sleep-deprived sentinel guarding the ruins of his life. The sun was high and unforgiving when the banging started. It was just after 11 a.m. I was in the kitchen, nursing a tall glass of iced tea, the bitter tang a welcome shock to my system. Gordon Ramsay was screaming on the television, eviscerating a restaurant owner for serving frozen scallops. It was oddly comforting, a familiar kind of chaos. Bang, bang, bang. The front door vibrated in its frame. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a frantic, percussive assault. My first thought, absurdly, was an overzealous delivery driver. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. There she was, Isabella. Her hair was a mess, her face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. She was rattling the doorknob with a violent energy, as if she could force the tumblers to yield through sheer force of will. "Cooper, open this door. What the heck is wrong with my key?" she yelled, her voice strained. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my iced tea. I walked to the refrigerator, pulled out the heavy glass pitcher of lemon water I kept for hot days, the ice cubes clinking against the sides. I walked back to the door, took a deep breath, and turned the new deadbolt. I opened it just a crack, leaving the security chain in place. "Oh, hey," I said, my voice unnervously calm. "Your key doesn't work because you don't live here anymore. Remember, you got married in Vegas." Her face contorted. The fury was replaced by a flash of genuine shock, as if she couldn't comprehend how I'd acted so decisively. "You can't do this to me, Cooper. I have rights. This is our home." "This is illegal." "Is it, though?" I said, keeping my tone conversational. Before she could launch into the theatrical monologue I knew was coming, I unlatched the chain, opened the door just enough, and with a smooth, fluid motion, I threw the contents of the pitcher directly at her. It wasn't hot coffee. It wasn't acid. It was just ice water. But her reaction was primal. She shrieked, a raw, piercing sound, and stumbled backward off the porch, drenched and sputtering. The shock of the cold, the sheer unexpectedness of the act, had short-circuited her rage. "Calm down," I said, my voice still level. "Cool off, and get off my property." I closed the door, not slamming it, but shutting it with a polite, firm click. I re-engaged the deadbolt and walked back to the kitchen. On the TV, Gordon Ramsay was calling someone a useless sack of potatoes. A beautiful parallel. 5 minutes later, the wail of sirens sliced through the quiet suburban air. Of course, she'd called the police, claiming assault, no doubt. I watched through the window as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 officers got out, their expressions professionally neutral, but their body language radiating a weary resignation. They knocked. This time, I opened the door fully. "Sir," the older of the 2 began, his hand resting near his service weapon, "we received a call about a domestic disturbance. A woman says you've locked her out of her home and assaulted her." "Assaulted her?" I feigned confusion. Oh, you mean the water? Yes, I did throw water on her. She was becoming hysterical on my porch. Did you throw a jar at your wife, sir? The younger officer asked, his eyes scanning me. Ex-wife, technically, I corrected gently. As of about 9 hours ago, and it was a pitcher, not a jar. A plastic pitcher with spa water. You know, lemons and such. It's very hydrating. I gestured to the new Ring camera I'd installed above the door a month ago. And luckily for both of us, the whole interaction is on video. Would you like to see? Their demeanor shifted instantly. The word video is a magic spell for law enforcement. I pulled up the footage on my phone. They watched the clip, her pounding on the door, my calm response, the toss of water, and her theatrical, flailing retreat. Ma'am, that's not an assault, the older officer said into his radio, presumably to dispatch, who was still on the line with Isabella. He threw water on you. I held up my phone again. Also, gentlemen, regarding the her home part of the complaint, I showed them the text, the Vegas photo, the triumphant freaking words. I swiped to the screenshot of the deed to the house, clearly showing my name as the sole owner, dated 2 years before our marriage. The older cop's eyebrows shot up. The younger one bit the inside of his cheek, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He was fighting a smirk. She's also claiming you've stolen all her money and belongings, the older officer said, his tone now more curious than accusatory. Officers, all of her personal belongings, clothes, shoes, jewelry, everything, are untouched inside the house. As for the money, the bank accounts were mine. She was an authorized user on my credit cards, a privilege I revoked this morning for, I think you'll agree, obvious reasons. I have the documentation for all of it. They spoke to Isabella again on the phone. I could hear her frantic, screeching voice even from several feet away. The older cop sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Ma'am, he said, his voice heavy with finality, this is a civil matter. You need to contact a lawyer. We cannot force him to let you into the house, especially given the circumstances. You need to leave the property. He hung up and gave me a nod. It wasn't a friendly nod, but it was one of understanding. Don't destroy her property, sir. Arrange a time for her to collect it. Of course, officer. I'll have it all boxed up for her, I said, the model of civility. They left. Isabella's car, a white BMW I'd made the down payment on, peeled away from the curb with a squeal of tires. Peace returned. I went back inside and poured myself another glass of iced tea. This time I added a slice of lemon, for balance. The next morning, the circus returned, this time with reinforcements. I was debating the merits of vacuuming versus continuing my noble quest to achieve a state of perfect indolence when I heard the screech of tires. A Honda CR-V, a vehicle that screams sensible choices, pulled into my driveway with all the subtlety of a car bomb. Doors slammed. Voices, sharp and angry, cut through the air. I peered through the blinds. It was a four-headed hydra of drama. Isabella, her face a mask of tragic fury. Her mother, Carol, a woman who clutched her pearls as if they were a life raft in a sea of vulgarity, and her sister, Camilla. Now, Camilla was a different story. She was Isabella's younger sister, built with the kind of extravagant proportions that defy both gravity and modesty. She carried herself with an air of belligerent confidence, as if her sheer physical presence was an argument in itself. She was flanked by the fourth member of their party, Charles. Poor, hapless Charles. He looked like a man who had won a raffle prize and was only now realizing it was a live Wolverine. He stood a few paces behind them, his shoulders hunched, radiating an aura of profound regret. They marched up the driveway like a disgruntled posse. "Cooper, you coward!" Isabella shrieked the opening salvo. "You humiliated me. You had the cops treat me like a criminal. Technically, you married another man and then showed up demanding entry to my house. I just provided the relevant context," I said, speaking through the closed door. Carol stepped forward, puffing out her chest. "Young man, you listen to me. Legally, morally, this is still her home." "Then why did she marry a slot machine technician from Paramus in a drive-through chapel, Carol?" I called back. "Did you know about that? Were you invited to the reception at the Bellagio buffet?" Charles, meanwhile, looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "Izzy, maybe we shouldn't do this here," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Camilla, whose formidable chest was barely contained by a tight-fitting crop top, crossed her arms. The movement was so potent, it seemed to momentarily bend the light around her. "You're being a real child about this, Cooper." "I'm the child." I finally opened the door, leaning against the frame. "I'm not the one who conducted an 8-month affair, faked spousal affection while planning my exit. and then showed up at my ex's house with my new husband and my family in tow, like we're filming an episode of The Real Housewives of Bergen County. That's when Isabella's eyes went wild. We're getting the house appraised. I'm entitled to half the value. I just held up my phone and waved it gently. Smile for the camera, everyone. The audio recording is excellent. Oh, and Isabella, you might want to have your lawyer, assuming you can afford one, look up the term marital asset. This house was purchased with non-marital funds, specifically my premarital inheritance. And your Vegas wedding? That's called adultery. In this state, that has certain implications for asset division. Sorry, this isn't Monopoly. You don't pass go, and you definitely don't collect $200,000, sweetie. Carol gasped, her hand flying to her throat as if I'd recited blasphemy. Charles, to his credit, seemed to possess a single shred of self-preservation. He turned without a word, walked back to the CRV, and got in, staring straight ahead. He was done. Camilla shot me a look of pure venom, turned with a huff, and they all retreated in a storm of muttered curses and impotent fury. The Honda peeled out of the driveway again, leaving behind only the lingering scent of desperation and cheap perfume. I laughed, a real, deep, gut-wrenching laugh. It was the first time I'd laughed in 2 days. I immediately called Arthur Vance. Not some cartoon character lawyer, but the most ruthless, bloodless divorce attorney in the state. Arthur, I said, it's Cooper. The circus just made another appearance. I'll be sending you the new security footage. I think we have them on the ropes. A few hours later, just as a fragile sense of serenity was beginning to settle over the house, they came back. They had a U-Haul, a small one, the kind you rent for a studio apartment. I'd spent the afternoon meticulously packing Isabella's life into cardboard boxes. Her fast fashion wardrobe, her collection of half-read self-help books, her decorative pillows. It was all stacked neatly in the garage. I'd even bubble-wrapped her framed photos. I was, above all, a reasonable man. I opened the garage door remotely and watched from the kitchen window as they began the grim task of loading her life into the truck. The atmosphere was thick with resentment. Charles, roped back into service, moved with the enthusiasm of a condemned man. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The U-Haul rental. I had, in a moment of petty genius, reserved the truck in her name. At the counter, she'd presented her credit card. I wasn't there, but the friend who works at the rental agency gave me a play-by-play later that evening. She swiped the card. Declined. A flicker of confusion. There must be a mistake, she'd said, her voice tight. Run it again. The cashier, a pimply teenager, ran it again. Declined. Ma'am, do you want to call your bank or use a different card? Silence. A thick, humiliating silence. She tried her debit card. Insufficient funds. The soul-crushing gaze of the entire group, her mother, her sister, turned to the only remaining source of funds. Good old Charles. The friend described the look on his face as he reluctantly pulled out his own debit card. It was the look of a man who had just been informed his affair came with a copay. The look of a man who thought he was marrying into a comfortable suburban life and was just now realizing he'd married a woman with the net worth of a college freshman. That image of his spirit visibly deflating as he punched in his PIN was worth every dollar I'd ever spent on her. I should have sold tickets. The real battle, however, was just beginning. My lawyer, Arthur, called the next day. His voice was laced with a dry amusement that I was coming to appreciate. Cooper, he said, get this. Her new counsel, and I use the term loosely, is trying to file for an annulment of the Vegas marriage. They're claiming she was drunk, emotionally manipulated, and not of sound mind. I snorted. Of course they are. It gets better, Arthur continued. They're simultaneously arguing that since the Vegas marriage is invalid, she's still legally married to you, and is therefore still entitled to spousal support and a claim on the house. That's ambitious. It's idiotic, Arthur corrected. She sent you a written photographic confession of adultery and effectively bigamy. She bragged about it. She's handed us the case on a silver platter. This isn't a legal strategy, it's a tantrum. Then he delivered the final glorious piece of information. By the way, I ran a background check on Mr. Charles Novak. He has 2 prior convictions for petty theft and currently resides in his mother's basement in Paramus. It seems he was under the impression that Isabella was the one with the money. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They were 2 broke, dishonest people who thought they had each found their golden ticket, only to discover they were both holding counterfeit bills. Isabella, predictably, went nuclear. She launched a scorched earth campaign on social media, painting me as a monstrous, controlling narcissist. Posts appeared detailing my alleged emotional abuse, my financial tyranny, how I had trapped her and forced her to seek solace in the arms of another. Her mother and sister shared them dutifully, adding their own commentary about my cold, cruel nature. A few of our mutual acquaintances, the ones who always prized drama over loyalty, lapped it up. But Isabella had forgotten about Ezekiel. Zeke was our group's resident tech savant, a man who could probably hack into NORAD with a graphing calculator and a half-empty can of Red Bull. I called him. "Zeke, I have a problem." An hour later, he'd recovered a year's worth of deleted Facebook messages between Isabella and Charles. It was a digital diary of their deceit, bragging about how they were pulling the wool over my eyes, detailed plans for their future, and the crown jewel, a message from Isabella sent 3 months prior. "He's so stupid and trusting. I've been skimming cash from our joint grocery account for months. Almost have enough for my dream wedding dress. Can't wait to see the look on his stupid face when he realizes I've played him for a fool." I had the bank statements. I could see the regular cash withdrawals, hundreds of dollars at a time, far more than our grocery bills ever were. I didn't post the messages everywhere. That would be messy. Instead, I had Arthur forward the entire unredacted transcript to Isabella's lawyer with a simple note. "Please advise your client on the legal definitions of perjury and fraud. We look forward to seeing you at the deposition." Her social media posts stopped abruptly the next day. The extinction burst, as psychologists call it, was spectacular. First, her father called my boss, a man I'd known for 10 years. He delivered a blustering, paternal lecture about how his little girl was being harassed. My boss, who I'd already briefed on the situation, listened patiently before calmly telling him that this was a personal matter, and that any further contact with my workplace would be directed to our corporate legal department. Next came the late-night drama. At 2 a.m., she showed up again, this time trying to jimmy a window open, screaming that I was holding her grandmother's jewelry hostage. A quick call to her grandmother confirmed that she was alive, well, and currently wearing the jewelry in question at a late-night bingo game at her retirement community. The police who responded to my call this time were even less sympathetic. Then she started calling my mother. Full-on waterworks, an Oscar-worthy performance of a remorseful wife. "I made a terrible mistake, Mrs. Hayes. Charles meant nothing. I love Cooper." My mother, a woman forged in the fires of Midwestern pragmatism and black coffee, did not miss a beat. "Well, Isabella," she'd said, her voice as sweet as poison, "you probably should have thought of that before you spent 8 months having closeness with him. Have the day you deserve." But the peak, the absolute summit of audacity, came in a phone call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Is this Cooper?" The voice was sharp, laced with judgment. "This is Gina Novak, Charles's mother." I had to sit down. I was afraid the sheer gravitational pull of her nerve would knock me off my feet. "I think," she began without a hint of irony, "that it's time for you to be the bigger man here and take Isabella back." I was silent, processing the magnificent insanity of her statement. "Charles can't afford a wife right now," she continued, as if this were a perfectly reasonable explanation. "He made a mistake. He was led astray. You know how young men can be. She's your responsibility." I finally found my voice. "Let me see if I have this straight, Gina. You are asking me to take back the woman who cheated on me with your son, so that your son doesn't have to deal with the consequences of his own actions?" "Well," she huffed, offended, "when you put it like that, it sounds selfish. I thought marriage was about forgiveness." "Gina," I said, my voice dangerously soft, "this isn't a marriage anymore. It's a demolition site, and your son was holding the detonator. You have a wonderful evening." I hung up and laughed for a solid 10 minutes. Forgiveness? Sure. Right after I forgive that cat I never owned for dying so suspiciously. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. It was, Arthur assured me, a formality. Bigamy, even the temporary, ill-advised Vegas kind, tended to simplify matters. Isabella arrived dressed for a funeral or perhaps a christening. She wore a simple, elegant white dress. The symbolism was so heavy-handed, it was almost comical. She was purity. She was a new beginning. She was the wronged bride. Her sister Camilla was her shadow, a silent, imposing bodyguard in a black pantsuit that did little to conceal her dramatic physique. The judge, a weary-looking woman in her late 50s named Judge Albright, glanced at them over her spectacles, her expression a perfect blend of confusion and resignation. Arthur was magnificent. He didn't grandstand. He simply laid out the facts with the cold, dispassionate precision of a surgeon. The timeline, the text messages, the marriage certificate from Clark County, Nevada. Isabella's lawyer, a young, earnest man who looked deeply out of his depth, tried to argue emotional duress. He painted a picture of Isabella as a fragile flower, mesmerized by Charles's promises of, well, he never quite specified what Charles promised besides a life of excitement in his mother's basement. Judge Albright leaned forward. Counselor, what specific duress are you referring to? He pressured her, Your Honor. He preyed on her vulnerability. Arthur stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to read a single message from a transcript already submitted as evidence. This is a message from the defendant to Mr. Novak, dated approximately 4 months ago. He cleared his throat. Can't wait to see his stupid face when he realizes I took him for everything. Your Honor, does that sound like the sentiment of a woman under duress? Isabella turned a shade of crimson I had previously only seen on overripe tomatoes. That was taken out of context. She snapped. I couldn't help myself. I leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for the court recorder to pick it up. What context exactly makes that better? Dead silence filled the room. Judge Albright banged her gavel. Divorce granted on the grounds of adultery. The prenuptial agreement is upheld. All assets acquired prior to the marriage remain with Mr. Hayes. The defendant is entitled to her personal belongings and the vehicle currently in her possession, for which she will assume all future payments. Then came Arthur's masterstroke. And, Your Honor, regarding the matter of rehabilitative alimony, as my client fully supported the defendant financially through her 2-year certification program, which has substantially increased her earning potential, we petition that the defendant pay alimony to Mr. Hayes for a period of 6 months. It was only $500 a month, a pittance. I didn't need it. But the principle, the sheer, beautiful, punishing principle of it, was everything. The look of apoplectic rage on Isabella's face as the judge granted the motion was worth more than any amount of money. We stepped out of the courthouse into the bright, indifferent sunlight. I felt lighter than I had in a year. That's when Carol, the mother-in-law I never wanted, materialized like a vengeful spirit.
You stole from my baby,
she screeched, her voice cracking. Before I could respond, Camilla whipped out a venti-sized Starbucks cup and lunged, intending to douse me in what I assumed was a scalding latte, but her aim was off. The coffee sailed past my shoulder and scored a direct hit on a woman standing just behind us. It was Gina, Charles's mother. She had apparently come to offer moral support. What followed was a scene of such chaotic, suburban fury that it defied belief. Gina, now dripping with frothy mocha, let out a howl of indignation and launched herself at Carol. Handbags were swung. Insults, arias of maternal rage were hurled across the courthouse steps. Security guards rushed out to separate the 2 middle-aged women, now engaged in a slap fight fueled by misdirected fury and caffeine. Amid the chaos, Isabella finally broke. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a raw, ugly, full-body sob complete with gasping breaths and snot bubbles. This isn't how it was supposed to go, she wailed, the pathetic central truth of her entire misadventure. Camilla, slightly spattered with caramel macchiato, tried to comfort her. It's okay, sweetie. You can stay with me for a while. Isabella looked up, her face a mess of tears and smeared mascara. I can't. Your apartment smells like cats and sadness, and your mattress is all spongy. Even Camilla looked defeated then, the fight draining out of her. The last I heard, through the ever-reliable grapevine of mutual friends, Isabella was living back in her childhood bedroom. The company had fired both her and Charles for violating their fraternization policy, a detail he had apparently neglected to mention. Charles himself, according to a furious Gina, had already moved on. He was reportedly engaged to a 22-year-old bartender he'd met at the casino bar during his 5-hour honeymoon. As for me, I sold the house for a significant profit. Turns out a quiet neighborhood with a recent spectacular scandal draws a lot of looky-loos and quick offers. I bought a sleek condo downtown with a view that stretched to the horizon. There's a concierge, a gym, and blessedly no ex-wives hiding in the bushes. His name is Mark. We met at the gym. He thinks the whole saga is the most hilarious, tragic story he's ever heard. Last week, he brought me a coffee with "Not Charles" scrawled on the cup in Sharpie. I laughed so hard I almost pulled a muscle. My lawyer, Arthur, had the Vegas marriage certificate framed. It hangs in his office between a picture of him with a Supreme Court justice and a needlepoint pillow that reads, litigate, exfoliate, hydrate. People sometimes ask me if I feel any regret, if my response was too harsh, too cold. The answer is always no. She didn't just cheat. She tried to humiliate me, to dismantle my life for her own gain and laugh about it. She saw me as a fool, a stepping stone, a joke. She played a stupid, cruel game. She won a stupid, cruel prize, her life. If I regret anything, it's that I didn't see it sooner. The little red flags, the way she talked about her exes, always crazy, always the problem. The casual way she'd lie about small things. I see it now. I see it all with a clarity that is both painful and liberating. I'm good, real good. And as I look out over the city lights from my new living room, with a good man making dinner in the kitchen, I feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. Peace, cold, clean, and absolute.